All the babysitters are going to Hawaii, except Mallory. Christy's going next month, while Mallory is going never. Poor Mallory.
Argo Funk Book Review. Argo Funk Book Review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. Christy recaps who everyone is, and she gives her friends a going-away present. Babysitters Club t-shirts! The club's name and phone number is on there, so they can advertise the BSC at all times. This makes no sense, because they're going out of state. If they get any new clients, they'll have to drop them in less than a week. Christy clearly did not think this plan through. Abby has trouble getting up early in the morning, and she still hasn't packed yet. Everyone goes to the airport. As soon as the plane takes off, everyone switches seats. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that. A girl named Sue sits next to Stacey's boyfriend Robert, and he's nice to her. That is so much romance drama, it has to continue for the rest of the book. Very bad move on Robert's part. Does he know how often Stacey gets vacation boyfriends in the super specials? She could easily replace Robert. Marianne and Logan also have relationship drama. Recently, Marianne's friends have complained she spends too much time with Logan. They decide to have a trial separation during the trip. Is it just me, or is that the exact same storyline as Marianne versus Logan? Continuity? I think it's a good idea for Logan to hang out with his friends on the trip. The problem is, he doesn't really have friends outside of the Babysitters Club. We're told he hangs out with Austin and Trevor, but we never see them. So the storyline sort of disappears until it's resolved in the last chapter. Jessi wants to make sure every part of their trip is recorded for Mallory's sake. She has a camera and a tape recorder. She writes constantly, while a tour guide teaches them all about Hawaii's history. At home, the Preziosos realize Jenny is a super brat. About time. They're trying out a new parenting technique, known as ignore Jenny whenever she throws a tantrum. It's a good strategy, but Mallory makes the mistake of taking Jenny out in public. When Jenny throws a huge tantrum, a random woman criticizes Mallory for being the worst babysitter ever. Claudia visits Pearl Harbor, which was attacked by the Japanese in World War II. Claudia is horrified that her ancestors did something so terrible, and she's not at all comforted by the fact that the Americans retaliated by doing even worse things. Claudia wonders about her grandmother Mimi, who was living in Japan back then. Abby learns Hawaiian words and goes to tacky tourist shops. On the beach, she sees people filming a suntan lotion commercial. When one actress quits, Abby quickly volunteers to be her replacement. She tells the TV people that she's 18. I am surprised they fall for this obvious lie when she is clearly in middle school. Dawn and Jessi visit a volcano. They go to a restaurant where there's a nice rainbow. Thanks for your contribution, Dawn. Christy works at a farm camp where the kids are wild. She and Mallory talk about the situation with Jenny. They agree Mallory did the right thing by following the parents' instructions. That's when the angry woman from the park calls. She's Margaret Wellfleet, and she hates Mallory so much, she calls into Mallory's work to get Mallory fired from the Babysitters Club. What is this woman's problem? Abby films the commercial. It's very simple. All they have to do is play volleyball and look sad at the end when someone doesn't use their product. Somehow, this process takes 3 hours, and Abby gets badly sunburned. Abby dreams of becoming a celebrity, and this gets the Best Drop Subplot Award, because Abby has no more chapters after this. I thought at least she would get to see her commercial, but no, her story ends here at the halfway point of the book. Oddly enough, this is where Stacey's story begins. She's still mad at Robert for being nice to Sue on the flight here. They visit a volcano, and Stacey pushes Robert inside. Just kidding. Stacey remains mad with Robert, even when he mentions New York, which is normally a surefire way to get Stacey's approval. Claudia continues to feel terrible about her Japanese heritage when they go to a memorial cemetery. She tries to avoid being seen by other people. Her bad feelings flare up again when she sees a Japanese temple and when some tourists mistake her for a native Hawaiian. A young boy goes missing. Marianne volunteers to babysit his sisters, and together they find the lost child. The adults are impressed with Marianne. Not for finding the lost child, mind you. They're impressed with her babysitting skills. Because of course that's the important thing here. Marianne gets a job with a local family called the Reynolds. Dawn discovers an abandoned lot on the beach. She's horrified to see the beach is covered with garbage. How could anyone destroy such a lovely spot? She decides to clean it up, and this is literally the same subplot she had in book 93. Continuity. Robert decides he wants to be a Hawaiian cowboy. Okay. He struggles with Stacey because no matter what he says, she gets mad at him. You can't win against her, Robert. You might as well give up now. They go in separate helicopters when taking a ride over a volcano. A storm hits and Stacey's helicopter crashes in the jungle. She and the other kids are completely uninjured because helicopter crashes aren't deadly in the slightest. Come on. They wonder what to do, and I can't help but think this section would have been better with Robert. Imagine Stacey lost in the jungle with her boyfriend during a fight. Much better than her being with random kids she doesn't have any connection with. Mallory has fantasies about telling Margaret off. She goes to the park every day in hopes of running into her. When Mallory does see Margaret again, she chickens out and says nothing. Typical Mallory. As it turns out, Margaret has a young son who is an even bigger brat than Jenny. He screams at Mom about how much he hates her. Mallory resists the urge to gloat, but she does catch Margaret's gaze for a while. Marianne babysits for the Hawaiian family. She's very excited to see another culture firsthand, and she almost realizes how racist she is being right now.
I almost said, a typical Hawaiian family, but I stopped myself. That sounded terrible. I mean, what if someone were visiting me in Stony Brook and said, I've been wanting to meet a typical suburban white family?
Marianne feels stupid to learn that the Hawaiian kids are totally normal Americans. Their grandfather is a World War II veteran. Marianne tricks Claudia into meeting him. Claudia's terrified that he'll hate her, but it turns out he doesn't care Claudia is Japanese. The war was 50 years ago, and nobody has any right to place an entire country's burden on Claudia's shoulders. Besides, he's 6 generations removed from a terrible criminal. If you go back far enough, everyone is related to a murderer at some point. That is slightly terrifying, but Claudia is comforted. Dawn organizes a beach cleanup. Everyone has lots of fun, and Dawn lectures the local kids on how they can keep beaches clean forever. She even gives them suggestions on cool fundraisers to support their ecological activism. Luckily for Stacey and the 3 other kids, the helicopter pilot knows the way to civilization. He leads them on a 15-mile hike through the forest, which should take about 6 hours. Stacey complains constantly because her feet hurt. Nobody walks this much in New York. I honestly think Stacey would rather die than do something that's not New York style. She almost does die as she runs low on insulin. She passes out and wakes up in the hospital. So Stacey was unconscious during the helicopter crash and their rescue. Why does it feel like the book is skipping over all the interesting parts of her story? Thanks to her brush with death, Stacey decides to forgive Robert for the crime of talking to another girl. Their relationship goes back to being utterly fantastic, at least until next book. Jessi narrates as the book quickly lists everything else they did on the trip, like go to Luau, visit more historical sites, and surfing. Logan tried surfing and failed miserably. Logan surfing could have been an interesting subplot. Dawn's a surfer, right? She could have tried teaching him how to surf. Sadly, it's the last chapter, so there's no time to get into that. Logan talks to Marianne on the plane ride home. He confesses he hated being apart from her on the trip. She feels the same way, and they agree never to be separated again. In the epilogue, Dawn wants to do another cleanup. Claudia has a serious talk with her parents about their family, and Christy tries to get a sitting job with the Hawaiian family. Because of course she does. The end. Post-book follow-up. Here is the cover of the book. Here is the ebook cover. As you can see, the book was scanned at a low resolution. This is a problem because, like most super specials, there are over 20 pages of the girl's handwriting. The handwriting is hard enough to read without it being tiny and blurry. I struggled to read it, and the Jessi chapters were so bad I eventually stopped trying. Most people like the book's illustrations. I wish they weren't low-res in my copy, because they do look rather good. The premise for the super special is okay. I kinda want to go to Hawaii myself now. As usual, I didn't like the structure of the book. The super special structures are terrible. It does not work to have 10 narrators in a 23-chapter book. That's not enough space to give everyone their own fully fleshed out storyline. This was a problem with super specials before Abby joined the club. Adding her and the boys as narrators just makes things worse, and we're inevitably left with problems, like Abby disappears after chapter 10, and Logan's subplot gets ignored because he doesn't narrate anything until the last chapter. Mallory's story was good. I liked her fantasies of confronting the mean mom, very amusing and in character for her. Christy did not have much of a story. She had a recap chapter, half a chapter dealing with mean mom, and half a chapter that ties into Little Sister 75. I find it weird that this book and the previous one make a big deal out of the fact that Christy is going to Hawaii next month. Only it ends up being totally irrelevant. Marianne's storyline with Logan was a total failure. It's introduced at the start and ignored until the very end. She should have at least referenced it during her chapters in the middle of the book. Her babysitting local kids was mildly interesting. Claudia's storyline was good and emotional, even if it was difficult to read in certain places. Dawn's story was boring, and made worse by the fact that we've seen her do this before multiple times. Get a new storyline, Dawn! Abby's storyline was somewhat interesting, but I'm disappointed that it went nowhere. Jessi had no storyline. She visits tourist places and writes about them. The others complain Jessi's too focused on documenting things for Mallory. It felt like the book was leading up to a story where Jessi learns a lesson about living in the moment instead of trying to capture everything. But no! She talks like a guidebook for dozens of pages. That's her story. I think Stacey's storylines had wasted potential. Stacey's jealous of Sue, but Sue herself never appears, so that went nowhere. Since Stacey spends most of her time in the jungle away from Robert, she can't really resolve her issues with him. But hey, being stranded in the jungle is pretty exciting. Overall, I liked Claudia and Mallory's storylines. I half liked Marianne, Stacey, and Abby, so 2 points plus 3 half points. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 13, Aloha Babysitters, Aloha score, 3.5 out of 10.